by the Pulse.
You're listening to Pulse FM in Geelong. My name's Rob Cameron. This is the Thursday edition of The Front Page. Last show for the year, and we've got a lot of varied topics to cover this morning. The first one is something that pops up all the time. It's workplace accident, injury. It's always a worry, for some people who work in higher risk environments, and a man who's going to help us work through how things are looking at this space. Are they getting better? Are they getting worse? Are we a much safer workplace country in Australia? Anton Guinea will go through with us. Good morning, Anton.
Morning, Rob. Thanks for having me. Can't wait.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you aboard. We enjoy the variety of the guests and subjects we have, and this is one we haven't spent a lot of time on in the year or so I've been here, so I'm happy enough to do it because, as I mentioned to you off air, I probably work in a pretty high-risk area in a woolshed. Sheep and fast-moving machinery are always a bit of a concern. We think we've got it right. We think we're aware of the dangers, but you work constantly in this environment. Is Australia a safer workplace now than it was 5 years ago?
Yes, the answer is definitely yes, Rob. So the good news is this year... it's really hard to talk about this because... Let's put it in perspective. This year we've had 150 deaths in Australia since January 1 in the workplace 2020.
That is a frightening number. If you would have asked me that question, I would have said 20.
Yeah, really? I know, and that's the 20 you've heard about, Rob. That's the sad part about this. And I'm so glad, and I love the way you prefaced our conversation by saying, we haven't spoken about this. Can I tell you something? Not many people do, Rob. I feel so strongly about this because I feel like it's a taboo subject to a degree. And, I don't feel like there's enough people like you that are actually willing to put this out there and pull it on as a discussion and say, hey, 150 is too many. What are we doing? What are leaders doing? What are organisations doing? What is society doing? Because that's 150 families. It's 150 husbands or wives or kids or parents that are now lost because of something that happened at work. They went to work one morning and didn't go home that night. So 150 is a big number. Then in answer to your next question is it safer than it was 5 years ago? Well, if you looked at the trend, 2019, we probably had the worst year in the last 5. So there was 183 workplace fatalities last year. And so that's, another 30% on top of what it is this year. So, if you're an engineer or if you are, a very sort of details person or just a numbers person, you'd say, oh, great, it's a safer place this year. Still, when I answer that question, I say 150 is too many. Yes, it's down on last year, which was actually up on the year before, so it was like 144, I think, in 2018. It's still too many, right? And I think you probably get that, which is why we're talking.
Yeah, what's interesting, Anton, is that those figures are very similar to, say, the road toll, and there's been a lot of effort put into the road toll. I think the subtle difference there is that a lot of the road toll circumstances are down to individuals making decision that affects them personally, whereas the workplace, it's more about the environment that people are in, and sometimes that's outside the worker's control. It's more of the boss's situation to work with it. So is the issue as much educating people about the risks that they're under themselves as individuals, as well as the organisations creating a good environment?
It's such a powerful, powerful question because safety leadership basically is what our business does. We help leaders understand how to talk to their teams, how to engage with their teams, how to give their teams a voice when the teams feel unsafe, when their team members go, the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up. I don't feel right doing this. I don't feel right being on that edge. I don't feel right using this machinery. I don't feel right where I am now. And it's the gut feel that you get just before you have a workplace incident, which I've got because I've had a bad workplace incident and spent a month in the burns unit. It's that ability to speak up. And it's the environment, and we call it psychological safety, Rob, is the correct terminology for it. And that came out of a Google study about 2015, which talked about what it takes to create really highly effective teams. And psychological safety is the ability for people to speak up and say what's on their mind and say, I don't feel safe doing this. I don't. I'm not trained. And it's then the responsibility of leaders to create an environment where those people are listened to. And the leader, instead of just saying, hey, we've got a budget, we've got a schedule, we've got to get this done, so go out and get it done, the leader says, cool, what can I do to support you to make sure that you feel safe and that we don't injure you as an organisation? Because at the end of the day, it's the individual that gets hurt, and it's the organisation that has the ability to create the environment where that won't happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does indeed. But I suppose as much as you think you do the right thing, some people get very confident and perhaps even blasé about the role they've played. They might have been in a position for 10 or 15 years doing the same thing day in, day out, knowing full well that there's an element of risk involved, but then getting to the stage of almost the mindset is, well, I know what to do, I know I'm safe. But it literally takes one split second and things can go wrong.
Well said. And you probably haven't seen the ad, because I've talked to Victorians. There's an ad up here in Queensland that says, I know boats. And it's a great ad where this person, says, I know boats, and steps off and jumps into his boat and goes straight through it into the water. And it's a great terminology up here. Again, and what I know boats means is that I know my job, I've done it 100 times, and here's something that we hear in safety, Rob. We've always done it this way.
Yeah, you're right. That's a very common thing that pops around. Well, in every part of society, every part of your life, this is what we do. This is the way I do things.
And as leaders, again, safety leaders need to challenge that thinking. I say to safety leaders, here's the thing. If you ever hear that, what that is it's an excuse from the team member not to do something more safely, not to take an action, not to put themselves out there. See, safety is a verb, which means that safety is doing. Safety is a little bit different to breathing, for example, Rob. We're going to do that naturally, whereas safety is something you've got to take an action. We've actually got to, do something differently. We've got to step back. We've got to, use a different tool. We've got to just work differently. And at the end of the day, complacency really is probably one of the number one issues for workplaces everywhere, because workers just don't step out of the mundaneness of their role. You think mine workers, for example, who just drive trucks on the same route for 12 hours a day. And the challenge now is how to engage their mind, how to actually keep them focused on what they're doing so that complacency doesn't let their mind run away and think about other stuff, so that they make a decision that in a split second is going to change their life ever.
What the 150, I imagine, is spread across a lot of industries, but would it be fair to suggest that general terms of construction and mining are the two worst? Great work. So if you looked at a WorkSafe Australia report yesterday, the top one is machine operators. So if you're operating heavy machinery, that is where most of the fatalities occur now. It's not so much mining. So if you think about who operates heavy machinery, Rob, could be excavators, backhoes, that sort of thing as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
If you looked at the leading cause of workplace incidents, or some of them, yes, it's falling from heights. Yes, it's dropped objects, where we drop something on someone's head. And it's also vehicle collision, because there's a lot of people that drive for a living. And so machinery operating is the big one. The next one down, believe it or not, is labourers. So it's, and I'll use this phrase with love, it's the unskilled role, it's the support role, it's the trades assist role, it's the role that is not trade qualified, for example, out there supporting, whether it's a tradesperson or an engineer, and all of a sudden most people are probably not led safely by the person or the persons or the business that are leading them, so labourers are at risk. And then the third one down is construction. So it's heavy earth moving, it's labourers, and it's construction, believe it or not. So people building stuff, so whether it's a high-rise apartment complex or whether it's Curtin University, like that young Jonathan Harston fell through that glass ceiling probably a month ago now, the 22-year-old who fell to his death, which was the second one in 3 years in WA, because in the CBD of WA, another young kid called Ruben, who was 17 at the time, fell through a glass roof in the Perth CBD. And all of a sudden now, out of that, WA have pushed through some legislation around industrial manslaughter so that we can hold businesses accountable for their actions and not leading and not preventing young Johnny from dying at work and falling through a glass ceiling on a construction project. And the challenge is that's retrospective. That's after the fact. Johnny's parents have got to live with this for the next 40 or 50 years. You know, to them, well, yes, we might put someone in jail for industrial manslaughter for not looking after him. They've lost their son.
Yeah.
You know, it's too late.
Just on that, are you down here in Melbourne, where very big construction sites happening often, and sadly, when the news does come through that there has been a death in that environment, there tends to be a day strike and audits of safety, things like that, and that in essence looks like a good thing, but I guess in a lot of cases it penalises people who are already doing the right thing. Are you comfortable that the relationship between employers and unions are good in this space?
Yes, to a degree. I would love unions to be more proactive instead of reactive. We see them most when something happens. You know, I'd love them to really to be up front and be at the forefront of preventing things from occurring. Now, I know there are some cases where they have been, for example. So, you know, if you look back to Sydney, say 2019, April the 1st, when young Christopher Casanidi fell to his death, 17 floors or 17 metres of scaffold landed on top of him. And if you ever want to know what health and safety means, just watch the interview with his parents from that one. Now, the unions were involved in that before that happened. And they actually said, and so did the safety advisors, and there's an email trail that said, hey, please don't do the work like this because this scaffold's unsafe. That's what we need more of. We need more. And, you know, that was an example where the unions got involved and they didn't prevent it. I hope there's a whole lot of times that they are getting involved where they do prevent something from occurring. We see them after the fact. We see them when something happens, and we see them on the side and talking about, hey, you know, why did they let this happen? At the end of the day, if I was talking to a union, Dello, I'd say, champ, what did you do before this happened? You know, were you out there working with the safety team? Were you out there working with the leaders? Were you working with this business? What do you know about their safety culture? Have you been part of a proactive safety culture journey with these organisations? That's what I'd say to unions.
Anton, I can detect a bit of passion in your voice, and clearly because you've lived what you're talking about. Just go through. We haven't got a lot of time, so without too much absolute detail of the incident itself, I'm more concerned about after the incident and what's been a driver for you to continue in this field.
So badly burnt, blown up in a switchboard job at the age of 21. Blew my face off, blew my, I suppose, skin on my face and the skin on my hands off. Month in the burns unit, skin peeled off. Couldn't wipe my own backside for a month, which was really interesting, and no one does it quite as well as you do, mate.
Correct, yes, I'd have to agree with that.
And so since then, it's a mission to just prevent this from happening. This happened to me, don't let it happen to you. So I've sort of travelled the world with this story, and I show photos, and I say, now here's the photos of what I looked like when I was burnt. Before you go out there and make a decision, if you have to make a safety decision, please keep these photos, this hurt, this pain in your mind at front of mind, so that there's something that's going to change your behaviour so that you will step up and say, no, I'm not going to do that.
So upon reflection of your circumstance, was it a little bit of employer, a little bit of you, a little bit of just pure accident?
It was probably 75% me. 21, and I had a different priority at the time rather than staying safe. It was, how do I get a job? Because I was a labourer, would you believe? Isn't that a funny story? So I was trade qualified, but I couldn't get a job as a tradesman, so I was working as what's called tradesman's assist. So I was working as a tradesman's assist, and I got this job of doing this, and I rushed into it, and I was trying to save 5 minutes. I was doing a 5-minute job, and I went home literally about 5 weeks later. So was it worth it? No. Was the organisation at fault? To a degree. Was there someone right beside me who I was responsible to who could have prevented it from happening? Absolutely. Was it his fault? Of course not. Could he have prevented it? Potentially. And that's what I say to leaders. I had someone right beside me that you know, could have grabbed me by the earlobe and said, champion, let's do it this differently.
Yeah. Yep. So the reason I asked that is I just wanted to know that you've had a chance to reflect. Now, if you've had this accident at work, and that's unfortunate, you've moved on, but there's a lot in the situation. There's a lot in that story there for you to really take hold of and run with in the future, because there's lots of little things that all culminated in one serious accident.
No, you're right. And, I remember the day that I was burned. I was lying in the burns unit, and the general manager from that site came up to see me in hospital. He said, "Anton, we want to tell you that, you're not at fault." These are the words, I still remember these. "You did everything right. We started the investigation. We found you did everything right. You isolated, you filled out the paperwork, you did all this stuff." And the biggest thing that I had to grapple with, Rob, was this. If I did everything right, why am I lying in the burns unit looking like a French fry?
Yep.
It didn't compute. So I didn't do something right. And what that was I used a steel ruler to measure in a switchboard, which was... And, you don't need to be an electrician to know that that's just a silly, silly thing to do. And it's it's just an accident, tragedy waiting to happen. And so I was willing to put something else before my safety in that moment. And I think that's probably the big message that I would have any worker out there. Please speak up. Please don't put another priority like a cost or schedule priority up your own personal safety, because you've got to live with this.
Anton, let's stay in touch. Let's get you to come back more, and we'll probably dissect what is a really big issue down into little pieces and do it frame by frame almost in the future. But thank you for your story today. I love passion that drives people, and you're pretty clearly driven by that. So let's do some more of it at another time.
Can't wait, Rob. Thanks for having me, mate.
Absolute pleasure. All the very best.
Bye.
Anton Guinea, just reminding us of the seriousness of workplace situations and how you might think you've got them under control, but ultimately every day is you got to look at it in some circumstances a day of danger, and you got to be well and truly aware of it. Not only yourself, but those around you. And I love that word, leadership. Someone's got to take control. There's always shortcuts. There's financial commitments. There's time commitments. All sorts of things. There's tiredness. There might even be just laziness, but you've got to be really, really aware of your environment in the workplace, because that staggered me. 150 people in Australia died this year while at work. That's hardly anything to be proud of. So if you're in a workplace, and particularly in a dangerous one, just be very, very careful of yourself and all of those around you. We're going to take a little